I think it's time for us to move on to the next speaker. The next panelist is Hemalatha Swaminathan. And Hemalatha is a dual master's degree holder in organizational and counseling psychology, and she's now pursuing her PhD in East-West psychology. She's a practicing psychologist and founder of Force Within in India with a keen inclination towards art therapy. Being from a dance and theater background, she has always been passionate about art and its ability to connect to the deeper consciousness. She is an award-winning theater performer and playwright, performing in national and international theater festivals. Her visual poetry has been published in the IEATA newsletter regularly. She's also the recipient of the Reena Sarkar Scholarship this year, January 22, for pursuing research in Asian rituals and mental wellness. Currently, she is engaged in designing a curriculum that focuses on contemplative studies and pedagogy using contemplative practices of movement, art, and theater. Hemalatha's title of her paper is The Moon Girl, a reflective paper on finding my containing myth through art. Hemalatha, it's all yours.
Thank you, Professor. A very good morning to all my fellow presenters and all those who have taken the time out here to witness our work. Paige, I think mine's just going to be a continuation of a thought that you have set rolling. And today I would like to present this paper of mine that took shape in the fall of 2021 under the guidance of Professor Ishtar and Professor Carroll. I'd like to begin with a question that came up for me during the course, and are our actions directed in pursuit of happiness or avoidance of grief? I believe that if one has experienced suffering, then one does her best to avoid grief in every possible manner. Then what does one's dharma look like? Is one even conscious of the choices made when the intent is to avoid suffering and grief and not experience joy and happiness? These are some questions that came up for me in the Introduction to EWP course. In this reflective paper, I'd like to share my journey as an Indian girl from an Orthodox Hindu family that engages in the rituals of rites of passage when a girl attains puberty. These rituals have left a deep scar on my connection with my body until I found my containing myth, the moon. I began to listen to the moon and I felt I was listening to my body and mind, my psyche. I began an art journal to record this relationship in sketches. The art journal and the materials used are testimony to the evolving relationship that I was building with myself and the cosmos. Myth is a perspective that connects the personal to the cosmos. My personal myth that was full of chaos and anger found anchor in the cosmos through the moon. It held, soothed, and calmed me. Connecting to the moon helped me to connect to myself. My artwork was enabling me to create a containing myth for myself to overcome a suffering. One's containing myth provides an anchor that one can hold on to in suffering, makes one feel safe and protected, and enables one to connect to the world and its events from a safe container. In this paper, I also present my sketches that have helped me reconnect with my body and understand the cycle of my body. I felt safe, nurtured, and beautiful as I emerged from this process. This paper describes my personal metamorphosis, moving from fear and frustration to self-love and offering support to women. What are these rites of passage? This ritual is an initiation to leave behind one mode of being and enter into new life circumstances. However, they can create a period of disintegration and turmoil that may lead to greater sanity and well being. At 13, my world turned upside down. Suddenly, everybody began noticing my body. I had attained puberty. In India, it's an occasion for celebration and initiation of a rite of passage for the girl. In indigenous cultures, these rites of passage were practiced to result in higher integration for the individual in a manner that enabled her to let go of the old and be born into the new. The rites of passage at puberty were meant to symbolically enable the girl to take on the responsibilities and duties of an adult. But the well meaning ritual becomes a traumatic experience for the child if she is not guided emotionally through this. These rites of passage become doorways to child marriage, dropping out of education system, and being burdened with household activities for the little girl. Every family has its own superstitions around it. In a patriarchal family, this would mean having the girl out of sight for the days that she is menstruating. She would stay in an extended part of the house and her movement would be limited to the washroom. She would not come in contact with the male members of the family as this is believed to defile the pure man. She is considered impure and untouchable during those days. Menstrual Health in India, Country Landscape Analysis, was funded by the Melinda and Bill Gates Foundation to study the impact of menarche on girls. This report is the result of a review of over 60 peer-reviewed articles and grey literature, over 30 interviews with experts and practitioners in India, and a review of relevant programming focused on menstrual health. The majority of girls in India lack awareness about menstruation before menarche. Their first experience of menstruation, which is mentioned in detail in this analysis, is often associated with shame, fear, and agony. Several regional studies have also indicated that menstruating girls are not aware of the biological reasons associated with menstruation and, in fact, perceive this to be a disease. One cannot even begin to imagine the impact of shame, guilt, and fear on the psyche of the young girls. Many girls and her influencers, which is essentially the primary family members, follow cultural practices and perpetuate taboos that restrict the girl's mobility and activity during menstruation. While these practices vary across regions and families, common discriminatory practices include restrictions on living and eating, cooking for the family, restrictions on visiting the temple, using flowing sources of water such as rivers and streams. Mothers and grandmothers can be particularly influential in perpetuating these taboos across generations. Data shows that girls are largely on par with boys up to adolescence, but with the onset of puberty, outcomes for girls have begun to diverge and girls face increasing restrictions on their mobility and agency. This analysis was published in 2016, not very long ago. My first encounter with shame and humiliation was from a grand uncle whom I happened to touch on my periods, my first one. I was very happy to have him visit us after many years. I was shattered when he pushed me away and ran to the bathroom to have a bath. I felt dirty. Being from an all-woman household, I was allowed to sleep inside the house and move around anywhere except the kitchen and the puja room, which is the altar or the shrine. However, this privilege is not extended to every woman. Some rural women live in shabby outhouses. Some are asked to stay in a small hut outside their village, which are often unsafe. Women have been raped and robbed during such monthly adventures. How do these years affect women? On days when they need comfort and love, they are separated from family and left to fend for themselves physically and emotionally. Studies based in states, including Maharashtra and Tamil Nadu, have shown that during menstruation, girls are asked to stay away from religious spaces, kept in isolation, not allowed to play outside, or even go to school. Girls have reported feeling anxious, guilty, and shocked due to lack of information about menstruation prior to menarche. What does it mean to be not able to communicate with loved ones or not have them listen to you at the tender age of 18? What impression does this leave on the mind of the young teenager about their body? I know I had begun to detest those days. I didn't want to be seen as sitting aloof as if I had an infectious disease. I began to see the hypocrisy with which woman's body was accepted in society. I felt that as long as it was functional and sexually available, it was accepted. Otherwise, it was shunned and isolated. On some days, I wish I had never been born a girl. One would believe that if a tradition pays so much attention to how a woman should conduct herself during her menstrual cycle, then it surely would also focus on her comfort, discomfort, or any illness that arises from this process. But it is not so. I experienced severe discomfort and irregularities, but these were often normalized as something every woman goes through. Painkillers were doled out as candies to bite the pain and get through the days without causing stress to anyone. The need to pause and reflect on my cycles, their irregularities and discomfort, etc., arose in therapy at the age of 40. It emerged that my erratic thoughts and mood swings seemed to have a cyclical pattern. I would observe an angry me, a resentful me, and then a totally happy me. Similarly, I would be very organized, planned, and meticulous on some days, while some days I would just not stop without executing self-sabotage. The pattern would manifest in my mind and body at least a week or 10 days before my menstrual cycle. For years, I thought it was just the sensitive me. In therapy, it slowly began to all make sense. The condition, its symptoms, its mental and physical manifestations, and my responses to it. I slowly began to observe my cycles and the cycles of the moon. I began to connect to my body and listen to it. I realized that a lot of my anger and resistance to love my body were creating stress in my body and adversely affecting my premenstrual symptoms. Engaging in art enabled me to understand this cycle of my body. When I was first asked by my therapist to describe how I felt as a 13-year-old experiencing my PMS, I made this following artwork. I call it The Hollow That Bleeds. And this is what I wrote about it. I'm supposed to be enjoying my teenage and I want to breathe in the fresh air. But all I can feel is that the swing that I'm sitting on is made of thorns, and that makes me bleed. There is a tree that holds me and supports me, but it bleeds too. This is a tree of all my ancestors, the women before me, who have suffered neglect and rejection, and have not been able to connect to their bodies with love and affection. How could they provide me with what they didn't have themselves? I can create my own space for myself and the women after me, who should not have had to hold on to the thorny branches that pierce through our body. We deserve new branches that are soft, unhurtful, and full of love. Gradually, I began to recognize a pattern in my cycles that coincided with the patterns of the waxing and waning of the moon. I began to observe the moon and how my body felt at each stage. Below are excerpts from my art journal titled The Moon Girl. Drawing how my body felt at each stage of the moon helped me to connect to my menstrual cycle, my body, and my feminine energy. I slowly began to appreciate the cycle of nature and learned to accept its ebb and flow, like the tides that rise and fall to the currents of the moon. This is a no moon day. It's all dark, and I am cradled by the night. I lie on the swing, and I'm unable to get up. There is no moon and no energy. I feel complete exhaustion. The darkness of the night makes me feel lonely, weepy, and isolated. This I know is the onset of premenstrual syndrome. I have to rest, take care of myself, and ensure minimum interactions that can trigger my sensitivity. It's okay to take care of myself, to take time out and walk out of social gatherings, if they seem uncomfortable. The moon has just risen, and as it touches my body, I feel I have the courage to just hoist myself up a little bit and allow the rays of the moon to cool me. I begin to feel the first rays of the moon, and it seems to cool my body and mind. My body feels less weak and ready to undergo the natural process. I have taken care of myself. My body is ready, and I need not fear pain or feel dislike as I go through this process. I can draw my boundaries, and no one needs to tell me what I should do or how I should behave on these days. I will do what my body needs the most. This is the half moon, and I feel that the half moon comes seeking me. As I am able to sit up, the rays of the moon shine bright and clear. My mind and body feel healed and new. There is an experience of loss and an experience of something new being born within. My body feels like it can hold the tension of the loss and life. I realize that previously I was so caught up in the loss that it made me emotionally vulnerable and exhausted. My body is home to loss and life, home to destruction and creation, home to darkness and light, home to Shiva and Shakti. I am held by the moon. I embrace myself. I embrace the moon. I embrace the cosmos within. Aham Brahmasmi. I am the universe, and the universe resides in me. It is dynamic and evolving. The moon shines in its full glory and sheds light on my body and soul. In the light of the moon, I am able to see myself and all that my body holds. It is not just an object, it is a woman, a cauldron of emotions, thoughts, elements, and the cosmos itself resides in it. This is the moon girl. I'd like to share being able to find my containing myth has enabled me to be there for others. I believe I have a sneak peek into what my dharma is. I do not see my body as a storehouse of grief, but a source of immense happiness. My personal journey has taught me to pay attention to the menstrual health of my women clients. In my counseling practice, I ensure I speak to women about their menstrual health. I ask them how they are being treated during those days by their family, what they feel about it, and how it affects their connection to their body. When asked to describe what menstrual cycle feels like, most women feel confused and tongue-tied. They don't know how much to share and how much to hold back. The obvious fear is that it will be rubbished or normalized. It could take women years to realize that they need psychological support to get through this, and even when they access it, the therapist may not be equipped to handle the psychophysical complications in its entirety. Every woman menstruates for approximately 40 years of her life. How long does one depend on any kind of medication? How long does one suffer any sort of discrimination? Why should women be told how to feel in their bodies? We need to talk about menstrual health not because we are fighting patriarchy, but because we need to stop fighting our body. Menstrual wellness is mental wellness. We need to create a safe circle for women where the elderly can prepare and empower the young as they embark on this journey with their bodies. When women love themselves and their bodies, they can in unison heal the planet and redeem humanity. This embodied relationship with life will manifest in psycho-spiritual healing for the future generations too. In this work of love, harmony, and beauty, heaven and earth will be united. I'd like to close and say thank you to all of you who've been here, and these are the references which I'd like to share as I close this presentation.
Thank you, Hemlata, for beautiful presentation. Yes, thank you so much. I think we have time for questions again. So questions to Hemlata for her presentation.